Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.
I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully you're doing well out there because today, it's another banger. We're talking about the quarterbacks for Week 2 fantasy football, but before we get into every matchup of every game and every player, how did we do last week in Week 1? Well, last week we gave 31 quarterbacks a start or sit designation that actually completed their games. Unfortunately, Fitzmagic did not make it all the way through, so he was not included. However, out of the 31 we did discuss, 20 of them were correct for an accuracy percentage of 65%. Some of our biggest hits, Trevor Lawrence, we knew he was going to throw a lot, and he did. Sam Darnold, post Adam Gase, is going to be better. He was a hit. And then Kirk Cousins also. Everybody wants to hate on Kirk Cousins, but dude is just consistent on a week in, week out basis. What about some of the biggest misses? Jameis Winston. I own that one. Why? I wanted to see how much Taysom Hill was actually going to be involved. It is now apparent that Taysom Hill will no longer really be that involved. Jameis is going to be the guy going forward. Tyrod Taylor. What? Tyrod Taylor out there putting up a big game. Can we count on that going forward? And then Jared Goff may not have a lot of people to throw the ball to, but he has to throw it a lot and put up some big numbers in Week 1. He was a miss as well. But now we're getting ready to head in to Week 2. Who can we start and who can we sit? Just a quick reminder, head over to Prize Picks as soon as this show is over. Create a new account. Use the referral code Headliners. If you deposit a minimum of $20, they'll match your $20 deposit. They'll match it all the way up to $100, and you can start making some of these picks with us on a week in and week out basis. We're having a lot of fun doing it with you, the community. Plus, you get an entry into our huge September giveaway. Anybody who signs up for Prize Picks in the month of September is eligible to win an autographed Justin Jefferson jersey, a Manscaped Perfect Package 4.0, and a Trevor Lawrence rookie card. You don't want to miss out on that bundle giveaway, so sign up for Prize Picks now using that promo code Headliners. But let's head in to the first matchup here of the week. We're kicking it off Thursday Night Football, the New York Giants and Washington Football Team. And all I gotta say is life without Fitzmagic, at least football Sundays without Fitzmagic, just isn't the same. I love watching that dude play football, but it sounds like he's gonna be out for a few weeks there with that hip injury. So now what moving forward? Because we've loved this offense so far of the Washington Football Team, thinking that Ryan Fitzpatrick was under center, but now it's Taylor Heineke. The kid isn't bad, okay? The kid's got a lot of balls. He goes out there and puts forth 110% effort 100% of the time. I love that about him, but it is going to be a slight downgrade. Not a huge one, I don't think, because he still likes to take risks and move the ball down the field. Do I want to start him in fantasy football? I really don't. Not this week. No, there's so many other good options with higher ceilings on a weekly basis. We're not going to consider starting him here this week, just like we're not going to consider starting Danny Pennies or Danny Dimes, whatever the hell you want to call him. Dude, he looks the same as last year, right? I mean, not that he's bad, but it's not that he's really good either. Some dumb mistakes, some pressure. What really helps him at times is the rushing upside, but it's just not something where I want to take that risk on a weekly basis. I haven't seen the step forward, the big improvement, especially with the added weapons. Plus, he's going up against that front of the Washington Football Team, which you know is going to be in his face like every single drop back. Not worth it for me here in Week 2. I'm going to go ahead and sit Daniel Jones as well. So then we'll move on to Sunday football. We got the Bengals, you got the Bears, and a pretty well-balanced offense for the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow, right? You still have that good combination of a running game with some volume back there and that big play potential over the top, which we saw just this past week to Jamar Chase. They're really doing more by doing less, if that makes sense. Joe Burrow's not out there having to throw 50 times a game just to give the Bengals a chance at a victory. No, he's not. He's becoming a lot more efficient, which we love to see. In fact, I'm going to head over to Prize Picks right now, and I'm going to smash the over on Joe Burrow here for Week 2. His passing yards are set at 245.5. So I'm going to smash the over. I think he can easily exceed 245.5 yards this week to make that a winning pick. Now, we saw Chicago at times get torched by Matthew Stafford deep, right? Especially Van Jefferson there at the start. They're vulnerable deep down the field. And that's exactly why I like Joe Burrow this week. It's kind of like, I don't want to say that Cincinnati is LA. Don't put those words in my mouth. But some similar offensive strategies could be, implied this week by Cincinnati to find some similar success. There's a lot of similarities there that I can see happening again in week 2, and that's why I definitely want to start Joe Burrow and smash the over on Prize Picks. As for Chicago, come on, just give it to Justin Fields. Just do it. The offense just looks more electric with him out there. And he's not getting a huge opportunity, but this guy, and I don't want to say that Andy Dalton was bad. It was a tough matchup for them last week against the Los Angeles Rams. He had his hands full. Nobody was running routes deep down the field. He had no time for routes to develop deep down the field. Allen Robinson ran like 54, short 5-yard curls or 5-yard crosses across. It was not great, right? But I do expect it to be a better situation, obviously, here this year. However, what I think is going to limit the upside in the time being is them splitting between Dalton and Fields. You saw Fields come in at times. You see Dalton out there for majority of the time, but then they swap touchdowns. It's just going to limit the overall ceiling. They need to find one of these guys and commit to them. Once they actually fully commit, they may become fantasy startable. But as of right now, until that happens, I'm not out there trying to figure out who's going to play on what down and distance in order to try to help my fantasy football team. Maybe a better matchup, but I'm sitting Andy Dalton and Justin Fields until we can figure this thing out and get more clarity moving forward. Moves us on to Houston and Cleveland, and holy Tyrod Taylor. If that's not the WTF moment of the year, I don't really know what is yet, because nobody was expecting a game like that from Tyrod. However, is it because he's that good, or is it that the Jacksonville Jaguars are just that bad? I think it's more of the Jacksonville Jaguars being that bad, because this matchup this week for the Houston Texans is a lot tougher going up against the Cleveland Browns. Sure, the rushing upside for Tyrod Taylor will help his floor, but he is going to become super big play dependent, and I don't see those big plays happening as often against the Cleveland Browns that we saw them against the Jacksonville Jaguars just last week. I got to see a trend first. I'm not going to write off Tyrod Taylor for the entire season, not by any means, but I got to see it against a team that just doesn't blow, right? So for Tyrod Taylor, he's going to remain in the sit column. For Baker, dude looked good, right? I mean, a lot of Baker haters out there, but the guy really only made one bad decision on the day, and for the longest part of that game was really taking it to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they were on the verge of winning until they just gave Patrick Mahomes too many opportunities. But now they get a matchup going up against Houston. We saw Trevor Lawrence complete many deep balls down the field to Marvin Jones and DJ Chark. The same thing could happen this week. Look for Anthony Schwartz to maybe get a deep one, maybe even some Donovan People-Jones. Jarvis Landry underneath. Options, right? And that's what we really like, a solid offense, a run-first offense, which really opens up the passing game for Baker, doesn't make him have to throw the ball a bunch of times, really leads to more efficiency, possibly some touchdowns this week and a good matchup. I'll start Baker Mayfield. Rams and Colts now, and I've said it here for months. Matthew Stafford is an elite quarterback who hasn't really been given his just due over times because he's been buried in Detroit. But now, in LA, with that offense and that efficiency, he's like unlocked, right? And he's really, really good. So efficient. So many big plays out there available for him on a weekly basis. Cooper Kupp looked great. Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, Van Jefferson coming out of nowhere for a lot of people. I don't really care of the matchups for Matthew Stafford. He kind of falls into that category for me this year, that as long as he's healthy, he's a start in that offense, which has produced huge numbers over the past few years. Don't forget, I've mentioned it multiple times, Jared Goff threw for over 4,600 yards twice in this offense. Matthew Stafford could approach 5,000. I'm starting him every single week that I can, that he's healthy, regardless of matchups. For the Colts and Carson Wentz, he wasn't bad, not by any means, not bad at all. What really helps Carson Wentz is the ability to have pass-catching backs with Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Kind of gives him that little safety outlet and helps limit some of the mistakes down the field because he doesn't have to force it as much. However, by dumping it off so many times, it really lowers that ceiling because he's not getting those big plays down the field. Now he gets a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Rams. We know about Aaron Donald. We know about Jalen Ramsey. This is not a matchup which I want to get too cute with, especially after last week with how they were somewhat taken advantage of at times by the Chicago Bears. I'm not messing with Carson Wentz this week or the Colts. I hate to say it, he wasn't bad. He doesn't suck, but not a matchup I want to start him. He's going to be a sit. Next up is the Buffalo Bills, Miami Dolphins, and Josh Allen didn't explode week 1, right? I mean, I guess you could say he had a bad game. A Josh Allen bad game, right? But if his bad games are still 18 points as a floor, I'll take that on a weekly basis. Look, you drafted the guy early, regardless of matchups. You drafted him and starting him for that ceiling on a weekly basis. Don't panic yet. Better matchups are coming for sure. A start with Josh Allen. What about Miami, though? I liked what I saw from Tua a lot. I saw Tua take a step forward compared to what I saw from him in 2020. Looked poised, looked a little bit more confident, looked a little bit more willing to go down the field. Not the easiest of matchups this week for him going up against Buffalo, but he does also get Will Fuller back. Love the connection between him and Jalen Waddle. Now you add in Fuller. We know we still have Devontae Parker. Fantasy Bigfoot going to make some sightings this year. Mike Gesicki maybe going to make some sightings. Weapons everywhere, right? Plus you have a pass catching back in the backfield with Myles Gaskin. He's got plenty of weapons to go up and compete against these types of matchups. A solid, safe floor. And you know what? I like Tua. I'm going to start him here once again in week 2. Patriots and Jets, and we get the matchup of 2 rookies now, right? Mac Jones for the New England Patriots, Zach Wilson for the New York Jets. And Mac Jones looked pretty good last week in his first start, right? The biggest issue for me with Mac Jones is he doesn't have that alpha wide receiver. He just doesn't. His alpha is like Nelson Aguilar, and I'm sorry. I wish he had more options there to really raise that ceiling on a weekly basis. He just doesn't have that dog in the offense. Now, that's going to limit his weekly upside, right? Because the touchdowns, the big plays, going to be limited. He's not a guy that can rely on his legs to give you those rushing upsides. It's just not his game. I don't dislike what I saw from him in his first ever NFL regular season start whatsoever. I just don't know if the ceiling is going to be high enough on a weekly basis to where I want to start him over so many other options. There's a lot of great options out there this week. I don't know if Mac Jones can surpass those better options, so he's going to go ahead and be a sit for me. For Zach Wilson, I said it in last week's video. I wanted to be wrong about Zach Wilson. I saw a decent game coming. I listed him as a sit last week, but I said I won't be surprised if the guy goes out and scores 20 plus points. And he did. I mean, we know that offense has no running game. He has him, that scrambling upside himself. Corey Davis deep down the field is looking great. Like he can actually be a wide receiver 1 in New York. There's no Stephon Gilmore still for the New England Patriots, so that helps. You know what? I'm not going to make the mistake again. Zach Wilson is there to throw the ball, and despite not having a ton of weapons to utilize, he's finding ways to make it happen. Plus, I won't be surprised if the Jets fall behind here in this game a little bit and have to throw to keep up. That may be what happens on a weekly basis, and that's okay. That's what raises the ceiling for Zach Wilson. He's going to be a start this week. Now we move on to the 49ers and Philadelphia Eagles. And last week I said I liked Jimmy G, right? That's because his weapons were there and they were healthy. They're not all healthy anymore, right? He's lost Raheem Mostert. We know that. Brandon Ayuk dealing with injury / being in a doghouse. We mentioned this about 2 or 3 weeks ago that we had word out of 49ers camp that Deebo Samuel was the guy, and they weren't exactly pleased with Brandon Ayuk. We shared that in videos, before the season started, and now all of a sudden week 1 is here, and Brandon Ayuk is basically MIA. That is concerning moving forward. Does it last all year long? No, probably not. But we saw what happens with Deebo Samuel, right? He got all kinds of touches and volume. And that's what we can kind of expect on a weekly basis, at least for the short term here right now. Plus, they were also facing the Detroit Lions. So it's not like, I want to overreact on some of these numbers because of the matchup. A lot more difficult matchup here this week going up against Philadelphia, who just shut down Atlanta last week because of the injuries, because of the question marks. Even though I like certain pieces in this offense, like George Kittle, like Deebo Samuel, I don't think I see the safety this week anymore from one Jimmy G, so he's going to be a sit for me. What about Philadelphia, though, and Jalen Hurts? Philly's doing it right. Philly is starting off the season and doing it the right way. They're committed to Jalen Hurts, it seems like now. We have that rushing upside on a weekly basis. They're not forcing him to throw the ball 50 times a game. He's efficient with having playmakers down the field with Devontae Smith. We see him utilizing his running backs in the passing game with Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell. That's giving him that safe floor with that super high ceiling we already know about. I like Jalen Hurts in a matchup here this week. Going up against the San Francisco 49ers is going to be a start. On the Raiders and Pittsburgh Steelers, and a chance for Big Ben to bounce back this week and really have a better game going up against the Raiders. Now, we saw at times in week 1, Lamar Jackson had opportunities down the field, deep down across the middle of the field, that they just couldn't capitalize in Baltimore. I expect Big Ben to take advantage of those here this week and really have a better game throwing the ball. Las Vegas can't contain all of the receiving options in Pittsburgh. Juju, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, one of them is going to find a huge day here coming up this week. The problem is you just never know who, but that's okay because Ben Roethlisberger is the one who's going to benefit from it. Plus, Pittsburgh continues to struggle on the ground a little bit and finding open holes for Najee Harris to run through. It's a great pass rush that we just saw for the Las Vegas Raiders. Want to take nothing away from that. I look for a little bit shorter routes and really trying to open up that running game, maybe the short screen game to get Najee Harris the ball in space and see if he can make something happen. I don't mind starting Big Ben here this week. As for Derek Carr and the Las Vegas Raiders, I want to. I really, really want to. I loved what I saw late from the Las Vegas Raiders. They started to open up the entire offense. It seemed like the first 3 quarters, all they were doing was throwing the ball to Darren Waller. Like that was it. And trust me, I love me some balls to the Waller, but they didn't start finding that late success in the passing game until they started utilizing Hunter Renfrow and Bryan Edwards. That's when the offense looked a lot better. Do they continue that? That's my biggest concern in a difficult matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who really held the Buffalo Bills in check. That worries me for Derek Carr in this offense going forward. Plus, the health of Josh Jacobs. How healthy is he? Is he limited going into this game? Does that really create more pressure on Derek Carr, more opportunities to really make mistakes down the field? What about Henry Ruggs? Are they ever going to get him involved? At times I saw him pull up like he was holding his calf muscle in just this past week's game. Is he 100% healthy? Can they find a way to utilize him? There's just a lot of questions. I like what I saw in the fourth quarter and overtime from the Las Vegas Raiders. I really do. I want to see them continue that here this week. If they do, you're not going to find another channel that's been a bigger supporter of Derek Carr over the years than us. Love some Derek Carr, but there's so many good options. As a quarterback too, I don't hate it whatsoever on any given week. But for right now, going to list him as a sit here this week in a difficult matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. New Orleans and Carolina, and Jameis Winston can see. The LASIK surgery has helped. He's throwing it to the right team, and it's amazing to see that. Plus, I love seeing that he's not sharing a whole lot with Taysom Hill. That was our biggest question coming into the season. Yeah, sure, they named Jameis the starter, but how involved is Taysom Hill? He's really not. But we wanted to see that. But now going forward, we know what to somewhat expect with Jameis Winston. However, he doesn't have those elite options, right? We know there's no Michael Thomas yet, but he's utilizing the names of Deontay Harris and Juwan Johnson down the field. There's options for him. They're just not sexy options, but that's okay. He showed to us just last week that he doesn't have to go out there and throw the ball 50 times a game like he did in Tampa Bay to have a really good game. May not be elite weapons, but his ability to spread it around is giving him that safe floor on a weekly basis, and it's hard for defenses to really game plan towards one guy because there is no alpha out there. Chris Hogan scored a touchdown. Ain't nobody worried about Chris Hogan out there, and dude scored a touchdown here this past week. Now he gets a better matchup going up against the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to go over to Prize Picks, and I'm going to smash the over on Jameis Winston right now. I'm going to go over there. His over-under is set at 229.5 passing yards. I'm smashing the over this week for Jameis Winston on Prize Picks. As for Carolina, you know I love me some Sam Darnold. I'm happy for Sam Darnold. I'm glad he finally gets away from Adam Gase and shows some of his true potential. He's got so many weapons with Terrace Marshall Jr. and DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, who he had that connection with this past week. Love what I see from Sam Darnold moving forward, but the New Orleans defense looked pretty dang good last week, right? They looked really good. I know Green Bay didn't look great on offense, but the defense for New Orleans deserves some credit. For me, that's a cause for caution. I'm not all over this start for Sam Darnold, but I think the ceiling is still there, and the floor with all these weapons will remain the same on a weekly basis. I will start Sam Darnold here this week against the New Orleans Saints. Denver and Jacksonville, and Trevor Lawrence is about to be the 2020 version of Joe Burrow, where we see him out there every single week throwing the ball 50 times a game. He just had 53 pass attempts in his first ever NFL regular season start. We saw the same type of thing from Joe Burrow last year. There's no commitment to the running game in Jacksonville. Is it Carlos Hyde over James Robinson? You still don't even know. You don't even know if Urban Meyer's head is into it. He's already had rumors come out about wanting to go back to college. There are so many question marks in Jacksonville, but they're going to pass. They're going to pass. And then when you think that they're done passing, they're going to pass some more. However, a matchup this week against the Denver Broncos is a lot more difficult than what they had last week against the Houston Texans. Sure, they're going to be losing on a weekly basis, and garbage points win fantasy championships because we rack up big numbers late in games. I prefer Trevor Lawrence to be a quarterback 2 for me if you're in a super flex or 2 quarterback league. However, with the amount of volume that he's going to be throwing on a weekly basis to DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, you got Marvin Jones Jr. With those guys out there, he can put up some big numbers on some big chunk plays to really help your fantasy team, and I will continue to start him because of that. As for Teddy Bridgewater, he loses Jerry Jeudy, which I absolutely hate. Plus, Courtland Sutton wasn't overly involved, kind of on a snap count, right? Didn't really get that huge volume in his first game back, but this is a great matchup for him going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were just torched by Tyrod Taylor. Yes, I'm going to start me some Teddy B in week 2. On to Minnesota and Arizona just looked great. And so did Kyler Murray. So many weapons, right? We talk about DeAndre Hopkins and the addition of Rondale Moore and AJ Green, and everybody just seemed to forget about Christian Kirk. Well, Christian Kirk is still a thing in this offense and had himself a big day. Plus, we know about the rushing upside of Kyler Murray. There's no reason why I would sit him this week against Minnesota. For sure, going to start him. For Minnesota, though, I am worried about Kirk Cousins. I love Kirk Cousins almost every single week. But that defensive front of Arizona is no joke and creates so much pressure. Just look what they did this past week between Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt. Kirk Cousins isn't going to have time to let those deep routes down the field develop to Adam Thielen, to develop to Justin Jefferson. And that really, really worries me because that's where Kirk's bread and butter is, especially late in the ball game. But with the defense, the way that it's looking in Arizona, I'm not going to take that chance this week. I'm going to go ahead and sit Kirk Cousins here in week 2, even though I really wish I didn't have to. I still think that Thielen and Jefferson have decent games. I just don't know if it's enough to put Kirk Cousins over that threshold to get him up there into that 18, 20, 22 points a week that we really want from our starting quarterbacks. On to Atlanta and Tampa Bay now. And how is Atlanta so bad? I mean, they have talent absolutely everywhere, but yet they're concerned with getting touches to Cordero Patterson instead of Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley, and even Russell Gage. What is going on in Atlanta? We know that they struggled moving the ball. We know they didn't really want to commit to a huge run game by only bringing in Mike Davis and then not even activating Wayne Gallman. There's so many question marks here, and now they get a matchup going up against Tampa Bay. In my opinion, not worth it here this week until this offense can figure something out and not look like hot garbage. I'm going to sit Matt Ryan against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady, I've had him in my top 5 the entire offseason, and it's because of the amount of volume they're going to throw the ball, right? I mean, almost every single game, they lose faith in their running backs and just end up throwing the ball. Plus, we know they're not against going up there and putting up 30, 40 points on an opponent. He looks great with Chris Godwin. Mike Evans wasn't even needed last week. Now, all of a sudden, you got all these potential threats with the reemergence of Antonio Brown, Gronk looking like his old self, 100%. I really don't care who he plays. I'm starting Tom Brady here again this week. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, Los Angeles Chargers, and the return of 2020 Dak is here, right? Which includes throwing, and more throwing, like nonstop throwing. And he's going to put up crazy, crazy passing numbers here once again this year. Now, he loses Michael Gallup, which is a loss. Plus, also loses a member of his offensive line with La'el Collins going to miss a few weeks. That hurts, right? Because that's what we really need is that protection for Dak Prescott, so he's not back there running for his life on a weekly basis. Do they rely a little bit more on Ezekiel Elliott? I think they do moving forward to ensure that Dak Prescott isn't asked to do too much, but the numbers still going to be through the roof, still going to be potential shootouts with this team every single week, and you got to start him no matter what. Same goes for Justin Herbert. Now, wasn't a huge week 1 for him, right? But this is still a pass-first offense, not overly reliant on the running backs, and he had 12 targets to Mike Williams. What does that tell me? This team wants the big plays. And when you have options like Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen, you're going to find those big plays at times, and that's what really boosts the ceiling. It could be a lot of back and forth scoring in this week that I'm looking forward to, so of course, I'm going to start Justin Herbert as well. Tennessee Titans, Seattle Seahawks now, and the Titans came out, I guess you could say flat, right? But let's give some credit to that Arizona pass rush. It was in Ryan Tannehill's face all game long. He still scored 3 touchdowns, but it was the turnovers that really hurt him here this past week. But I'm not too overly worried with Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for scoring going forward, and I'm not going to write him off after just one bad week, especially in a week like this where he should be able to have a little bit more time to find some more success deeper down the field. Going to continue to start Ryan Tannehill. Same goes for Russ. Early season Russ is always allowed to cook, right? For whatever reason, to start season, Seattle starts off super hot, and they really let Russ throw the ball deep down the field. We saw it multiple times last week to Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. He's still involved, and with those two guys in your lineups, who can take it to 80 yards to the house in the blink of an eye, it's hard to sit Russell Wilson ever. But when he's cooking like this early in the season, going deep down the field, it's money in the bank. Definitely going to start Russell Wilson. Which takes us to Kansas City and Baltimore, our Manscaped matchup of the week. Just a reminder, as soon as this show is over, fellas, head over to manscaped.com, get yourself something nice for your travel bag, and use promo code HEADLINERS at checkout. We're going to give you 20% off and free shipping, so don't miss out on that deal here this year. But now back to the game. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, is there any question whether or not you should start these guys this week? If there is, fantasy football may not be for you. These guys are absolute must-starts every single week. You drafted them high, you're going to start them. Hate to see the turnovers from Lamar Jackson, but I'm really hoping the infusion of veteran running backs can help with that blitz pickup and pass protection, so he's not back there trying to just, hold on to the ball with his dear life in his hands, because he was just getting killed there the end of the game by that Las Vegas pass rush. But as for the starts, no brainer here. Both these guys find themselves in the start column. Which takes us to Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers, which is just what the doctor ordered for the Green Bay Packers, right? Try to get them back on track. Doing it against Detroit really helps, right? So now we know that Detroit has lost Jeff Okudah, and Detroit just allowed 314 passing yards to Jimmy Garoppolo. Do not panic on Aaron Rodgers and say the guy's losing on purpose, or he sucks, or he just doesn't care. Come on. Let's be realistic, and let's give a little bit of credit last week to the New Orleans Saints, but I'm not writing off the entire season for the Green Bay Packers and last year's NFL MVP. He's going to remain a start for me this week in a great matchup going up against Detroit. As for Detroit and Jared Goff, 338 yards passing and 3 touchdowns versus San Francisco. Jared Goff, he surprised me, especially with that hodgepodge mixture of wide receivers and basically TJ Hawkinson. Like, that's all he's got. But you know what? He made it happen, and he found ways to get the ball down the field. What really helps him are the check down passes to the likes of a DeAndre Swift and a Jamal Williams, who are able to make defenders miss and potentially get some big plays out of it. That's what's really helping the floor on a weekly basis of Jared Goff. Now a matchup going up against the Packers, who are going to be at home, coming off a loss in which they were absolutely embarrassed. And we know that secondary typically pretty strong for the most part for the Green Bay Packers. I am not overly excited to start Jared Goff, and I'm sure you're not either. A great week 1, but not enough for me to put him in the start column here in week 2. All right, so those are our starts and sits for the quarterback position here, week 2 fantasy football. But leave a comment down below. Which one of these quarterbacks are you a little bit worried about, and which are you super pumped to be able to start here in week 2 of fantasy football? Love to stay interactive, love to continue to communicate with you guys. Don't forget, head over to prizepicks.com or download the app, sign up for that new account, and use the referral code HEADLINERS. And let's start making some of these picks together and walking away with some extra money by the time the season is over. Looking forward to that, but hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, a great week. We'll talk to you later.